return to the plotting and scheming of the Queen Regent and Hand of the King in King's Landing, we must turn our attention across the realm to the Westerlands, where Rhaena Targaryen, whom people had already begun to call the Queen in the West, resided with her small court, her new husband, and favourites on Fair Isle. It will be recalled the Queen Elissa had been distraught by her elder daughter's third marriage, more so than the one her son would soon make, though Rhaena's marriage was of far less consequence to the realm and fate of Westeros. She was not alone in this, for in truth, Androw Farman was a very odd choice for a member of House Targaryen, a widowed queen nonetheless. The second son of Lord Farman, not even the heir. Androw was said to be a handsome boy with pale blue eyes and long flaxen hair, but he was 9 years younger than the Queen, and even at his own father's court there were those who scorned him as half a girl, for he was soft of speech and gentle of nature. A failure of a squire, he had never become a knight, having none of the martial skills of his lord father or elder brother. For a time, his sire had considered sending him to Old Town to forge a maester's chain, until his own maester told him the boy was simply not clever enough, and could hardly read nor write. Later, when asked why she had chosen such an unpromising spouse, Rhaena Targaryen simply replied, "He was kind to me." But many suspect there was a different reason for her supposed affection towards Androw Farman. Androw's father had been kind to Rhaena as well, offering her refuge on Fair Isle after the battle beneath the God's Eye, when her uncle, Maegor the Cruel, was demanding her capture, and the poor fellows of the realm were denouncing her as a vile sinner and her daughters as abominations. Most lords, even great lords, would have turned her out at the threat of the Black Dread's wrath, but Lord Farman gave Rhaena safe refuge from the incoming storm, with little promise of reward, for it was the honourable thing to do. But some do put forward the suggestion that the widowed Rhaena took Androw for a husband in part to repay his father for that very kindness. For Lord Farman, himself a second son who was never expected to rule, was known to have great fondness towards his son Androw, despite his deficiencies. May perhaps there is some truth in that assertion, but another possibility, first put forward by Lord Farman's maester, may cut closer to the truth. The Queen found her true love on Fair Isle. Maester Smike wrote to the citadel of Old Town, but not with Androw, but with his sister, Lady Elissa. 3 years younger than Androw, Elissa Farman was thus closer in age to Rhaena, shared her brother's blue eyes and long flaxen hair, but in every other way that mattered, she was unlike her sibling in every conceivable manner. Sharp of wit and sharp of tongue, she loved horse riding, dogs and hawking. She was a fine singer and a skilled archer, but her greatest love of all was sailing. The wind our steed, were the words of House Farman of Fair Isle, who had sailed the western seas since the dawn age of Westeros, and Lady Elissa embodied them like no other Farman ever had. As a child, it was said she had spent more time at sea than upon land. Her father's crews used to laugh to see her, climbing the rigging like a monkey. She sailed her own boat around Fair Isle at the age of 14, and by the time she was 20, she had voyaged as far north as Bear Island and as far south as the Arbor. Ofttimes, to the horror of her Lord Father and Lady Mother, she spoke of her desire to take a ship beyond the western horizon, to learn what strange and wondrous lands might lay on the far side of the Sunset Sea. Lady Elissa had been betrothed 2 times, like most highborn girls of her age, first at the age of 12, when that match broke down, again at 16. It is said on each occasion she contrived to drive her prospective match away, as her father confessed with rueful candour. In Rhaena Targaryen, she had last discovered a kindred spirit, and the Queen in turn gained a trusted confidant. But unlike her other companions, there was certainly something different and deeper in their relationship. Alongside Alayne Royce and Samantha Stokeworth, 2 of Rhaena's oldest companions, the pair became inseparable, forming what Ser Franklyn Farman, heir to Lord Marq, mockingly named the 4-headed beast, a court within the court. Androw Farman, Rhaena's husband, was sometimes permitted into this inner circle, though never so fully as to be counted as the 5th head. He was mostly there given his connection to Elissa and Rhaena. Most telling of all, Queen Rhaena seldom, if ever, took him aloft on her dragon Dreamfyre, an honour she readily shared with Elissa, Alayne and Sam. It must be said, however, that the omission may not have entirely been her choosing. It's quite possible the Queen extended the invitation to Andrew, only to have him decline, for he was not a man much given to daring. Thus is the issue when judging actions and characters through the lens of history, centuries past. The reality is, while we can make our best judgment, we can never know the whole truth of the matter. To think of Rhaena's years at Faircastle as some pastoral idyll would be a grievous error. Her presence was far from universally embraced. Upon the remote island, poor fellows still lingered. Men incensed that Lord Marq and his father before him had offered refuge and support to one they deemed an enemy of the faith. Nor did the presence of Dreamfyre ease the simmering tensions. A dragon glimpsed once in a generation might inspire awe and a fearful pride, but some fair islanders boasted of having a dragon of their own. Yet others grew uneasy beneath the shadow of the great she-dragon, especially as she rapidly increased in size and appetite. The matter of feeding a growing dragon is no small task. When word spread that Dreamfyre had laid a clutch of eggs, a begging brother from the inland hills took to preaching that Fair Isle would soon be a swarm of dragons, devouring sheep and cows and men alike, unless some hero rose to slay the beast. Lord Farman dispatched knights to seize and silence the man, but not before thousands had heard his dire prophecies. Though the preacher perished in the dungeons beneath Faircastle, his warnings endured, stirring fear wherever they were repeated. Even within Lord Farman's own hall, the Queen faced quiet enmity, most notably from his heir Ser Franklyn. He had shed blood in the Battle of the God's Eye in service to Prince Aegon the Uncrowned, and there had suffered a wound. His grandfather and elder brother had fallen upon the same field, and it had been a grim duty to bear their bodies home to Fair Isle. Yet, to Ser Franklyn's eye, Rhaena Targaryen displayed scant remorse for the sorrow that had befallen House Farman, and little gratitude towards him personally. He bristled at the closeness with his sister, Elissa. Rather than tempering the girl's willful nature, he believed the Queen ought to have urged her towards a proper marriage, and the duty of providing heirs. Nor did he take kindly to the way the so-called four-headed beast had come to dominate life at Faircastle. While both he and his Lord Father found themselves increasingly overshadowed, in this resentment he was not without cause. As Maester Smike observed, more and more highborn lords from the Westerlands and beyond made their way to Fair Isle, but when they arrived it was to seek an audience with the Queen in the west, not with the minor lord of the small island and his son. So long as Lord Marq Farman was indeed Lord of Fair Isle, such tensions mattered little to Rhaena and her four-headed beasts. His lordship was by all accounts amiable and warm of heart, devout to all his children, wayward daughter and gentle ineffectual son alike, and bore genuine affection for Rhaena Targaryen, not at least because she loved them as he did. But scarcely 2 weeks after the first anniversary of Rhaena's marriage to Andrew, Lord Marq died suddenly at the dinner table, choking upon a fishbone at the age of 64. With his death, Ser Franklyn succeeded as Lord of Fair Isle, and events moved swifter thereafter. He wasted no time in stamping his lordly authority. The day following his father's funeral, Franklyn summoned the Queen to the Great Hall. He would not go to her. There, before his court, he commanded her to leave Fair Isle. She was neither wanted nor welcome, he declared. She might take her dragon, her companions, and his weakling brother with her, but included one last sting in the tail. Not his sister Elissa, he insisted. She would remain and be wed to a husband of his choosing, as was her place and duty. Courage Franklyn possessed in ample measure, as Maester Smike later wrote to the Citadel. Prudence, however, he sorely lacked. In that charged moment, standing before a dragon-riding queen, whose mount was the great Dreamfyre, he did not seem to grasp the narrow gulf between defiance and annihilation. The maesters would later confess that he glimpsed fire in Rhaena's eyes, and in that instant imagined Faircastle engulfed in Dreamfyre's flame, its pale towers blackened and crumbling into the sea, as the dragon wheeled overhead again and again. Rhaena Targaryen was the blood of the dragon, the granddaughter of Aegon the Conqueror, and too proud to remain where she was unwelcome. That very night, she did as Lord Franklyn bid her and left Fair Isle, mounting Dreamfyre and flying for the nearby Casterly Rock to her old friends of House Lannister, who too had sheltered her for a time from Maegor. She left after bidding her husband and companions follow by ship, with all those who might love me. When Androw, red-faced with fury, proposed to challenge his brother to single combat, the Queen swiftly forbade it. "He would hew you to pieces, my love," she warned him, "and if I were to be widowed yet again, men would call me a witch or worse, and drive me from Westeros." She reminded him that Lyman Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, had offered her refuge once before. Of his welcome, Queen Rhaena had no doubt she would yet again be received. Androw, Samantha Stokeworth, and Alayne Royce departed the following morning to follow their queen, accompanied by more than 40 of her companions, servants and sworn followers, as Rhaena had gathered a small household about her during her years as the Queen in the West. Elissa Farman, too, went with them, having no wish to be left behind. Her ship, the Maiden's Fancy, stood ready for voyage. Yet when the Queen's party came to the docks, they found Ser Franklyn awaiting them. The others might depart, and gladly, he declared, but his sister would remain upon Fair Isle and submit to a marriage of his choosing. The new lord had brought 6 men with him, and sorely misjudged the affection the small folk bore his sister, especially the sailors, shipwrights, fisherfolks, and all the folk of the harbour, many of whom had known her since childhood. As Lady Elissa faced her brother, spitting her defiance and commanding him aside, a crowd began to gather, their tempers rising with every word. Blind to their growing anger, Lord Franklyn reached to seize his sister, and in that moment the onlookers surged forward. His men were overwhelmed before steel could even be drawn. 3 were hurled from the docks into the sea, whilst Lord Franklyn himself was tossed into a holding of a ship, brimming with freshly caught cod. Thus did Elissa Farman and the rest of the Queen's court board the Maiden's Fancy unmolested, and sailed for Lannisport. Lord Lyman Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, had once granted refuge to Rhaena and her husband, Aegon the Uncrowned, when Maegor the Cruel called for their heads. His bastard son, Sir Tyler Hill, had fought beside Prince Aegon at the God's Eye. His lady wife, the formidable Jocasta Tarbeck, had grown close to Rhaena during her early stay at the Rock, and had been the first to perceive the Queen was pregnant with child. As Rhaena had anticipated, the Lannisters received her warmly once again, and when the remainder of her household came ashore, they were too taken in. A splendid feast was proclaimed in their honour. An entire stable was set aside for Dreamfyre, and Queen Rhaena, her husband and her companions of the so-called 4-headed beast, were lodged in richly furnished chambers deep within the bowels of the rock itself, secure against any and all threats. There they remained for more than a moon's turn, partaking of the lavish hospitality of the wealthiest house in all of Westeros. Yet as the days lengthened, the same hospitality began to weigh heavy upon Rhaena. It soon seemed plain that the bedmaids and servants assigned to her were little more than informers, bearing tales of every word and deed back to Lord Lyman and his lady wife. One castle sceptre went as far to inquire of Samantha Stokeworth whether the Queen's marriage to Androw Farman had been consummated, and if so, who stood witness to the bedding. Sir Tyler Hill, handsome and well-favoured, showed open disdain for Androw, even as he sought tirelessly to curry favour with the Queen herself, recounting all his deeds at the battle beneath the God's Eye, and displaying the scars he won there. "In your Aegon's service," he said. Lord Lyman, for his part, began to show an unseemly fascination with the 3 unhatched dragon eggs Rhaena had carried from Fair Isle, speculating upon when and if they might hatch. Lady Jocasta suggested in private that one of the eggs would make a fitting token of gratitude to House Lannister. When the overture failed, Lord Lyman proposed purchasing the eggs outright, offering a staggering amount of gold in exchange. Lyman Lannister desired more than honour of hosting a highborn guest. Queen Rhaena now understood. Beneath his kind manner lay a mind too shrewd and ambitious to be content with courtesy alone. He sought an alliance with the Iron Throne, perhaps by wedding his bastard or one of his true-born sons to the Queen, some match that might elevate House Lannister above the likes of the Hightowers, Baratheons and Velaryons, to stand second only to the Dragon Kings themselves. And more than that, he coveted dragons. With dragon riders of their own, the Lannisters would stand equal to House Targaryen. There were kings once, Rhaena reminded her companions. He smiles, yet he was raised on the tales of the Field of Fire. He has not forgotten. Rhaena knew her histories all too well, the chronicles of the freehold of Valyria, written in blood and flame. We cannot remain here, she confided at last to the four-headed beast.